Hello, and today's learning target is I can recognize and use the properties of real numbers. Let's take a look at the first property. The commutative property. Numbers can be added, or multiplied in any order. For an example, this means I could have like 5 plus 3 is equal to 3 plus 5. Or for multiplication, here I could have 2 times 3 equals 3 times 2. So I'm just flip-flopping the order. What it could not be, though, is like 5 minus 3 is equal to 3 minus 5. And that doesn't work because subtraction is not the same, right? 5 minus 3 is 2, but 3 minus 5 is negative 2, so it doesn't hold for subtraction. Now let's look at the associative property. This means that numbers can be added or multiplied regardless of the parentheses. So an example of the associative property could be, in parentheses, 5 plus 3 plus 8 is equal to 5 plus, now in parentheses, 3 plus 8. What that could be like for multiplication would be, I could have like 2 times the quantity 4 times 9, and that's equal to, in parentheses, 2 times 4 times 9. So it must be the same operation throughout. So for example, on this first one, we had plus signs, right, all throughout, and then in the other example, we had multiplication signs all throughout. It's got to be the same throughout the entire equation. What an example of this would not look like would be like 3 times the quantity 2 plus 5. That's not equal to 3 times 2 plus 5, right? Because that's not the same. So I should actually, if I go back up to the commutative property, I should have put a does not equal sign as well, right? A slash through the equal sign. So now if we look at the identity property, and that's a typo there, this should say identity, whoops, so it should be let's retype that. The identity property, and this means adding by 0 and multiplying by 1. So I can say here, adding by 0 and multiplying by 1. It does not change the value of a number. So an example could be 3 plus 0 equals 3, or for multiplication, a times 1 equals a. So again, adding by 0 or multiplying by 1. The distributive property states that when multiplying a number by a sum, so I'll write multiplying a number by a sum, you can multiply each part by the number. So an example would be 3 times the quantity, 2 plus 8, and that's equal to 3 times 2 plus 3 times 8. So I'm just splitting it up basically like I'm drawing an arrow here and multiplying my first number or my first term by each term inside the parentheses. This could also be written, if I used variables, I could say, for example, a times b plus c, and that's equal to a times b, which is ab, plus ac. Okay, the additive inverse means adding any number and its opposite results in 0. So let's write this down. Adding any number and its opposite my stylus seems to not be, it doesn't seem to be reading its sensor, so it's not writing very neat, and apologize about that, results in 0. An example of this would be like 5 plus negative 5, because that gets to 0. All right, now the multiplicative inverse. Multiplicative inverse states that multiplying any number by its inverse, or think reciprocal, results in 1. So let's write here any number by its inverse, and then I'll put in parentheses, think reciprocal results in 1. So an example of this would be 3 times 1/3, that equals 1. Or for a variable, I could maybe write here like a times 1 over a equals 1 as well. The multiplicative property of 0 states that multiplying by 0 always equals 0. Multiplying by 0 always equals 0. So an example of that would be 5 times 0 equals 0, or a times 0 equals 0. So again, just multiplying by 0 always equals 0. The reflexive property means any number equals itself. So an example of this would be -2 equals -2, or a equals a. So any number, or even variable, equals itself. Now let's take a look at a few examples. Let's identify which property is being used. 3 plus 8 equals 8 plus 3. This is the commutative property. Now if I look right below it, 7 plus 0 equals 7. This would be the additive identity. And again, because I'm adding 0 just to get the number itself. A times BC equals AB times C. So what I'm doing is I'm just shifting the parentheses, so this would be the associative property. A times 1 equals A. This would be similar to the 7 plus 0 equals 7 because I'm getting that number itself, but here you're multiplying by 1, so it's the multiplicative identity. R times 0 equals 0 would be the multiplicative property of 0. And I'll just shorthand that and call it mult, and then property of 0. 6 plus -6 equals 0 would be the additive inverse. And b times 1 over b equals 1. Again, I'm getting 1 here for an answer, so I'm multiplying by its inverse, so that's the multiplicative inverse. Now let's look at the next row here. So see here I see 2 plus 8 times, or 2 times in parentheses, 8 plus 3 equals 2 plus 8 times 3. So what I'm doing is I'm just shifting the parentheses again, so this would be the associative property. Negative 8 times 1 equals negative 8. So I'm getting the number back itself. So this is the multiplicative identity. Nine times 1/9 equals 1, very close to the one we just saw, but this is the multiplicative inverse because I'm getting 1, not the number itself. T plus V equals V plus T is the commutative. And then 3 times in parentheses, 10 plus 5 equals 3 times 10 plus 3 times 5 would be the distributive property. Seven equals 7 is the reflexive property. X plus, in parentheses, y plus z equals x plus y plus z would be the associative property because I'm shifting the parentheses. And then one more for a challenge problem. 4 plus, in parentheses, 5 plus 2 equals 4 plus, in parentheses, 2 plus 5. So we're not shifting the parentheses, but what do we notice here? We notice that it's 5 plus 2 here, but 2 plus 5 here. So this would actually be the commutative property. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. Bye-bye.